Hey, it's New Thought Talk. I'm your host, Reverend Steve Walling, from the Spiritual Awareness Center located in beautiful Fresno, California, which is the heart of California's Central Valley. And California's Central Valley is the heart of the state of California, so we got a lot of heart going on here today, and I hope you're having a great day, because it is a great day. It's a great day because it was gifted to each and every one of us. This day was projected to be gifted to us long before we took our first breath, and now that we're here, let's make the most of today. And that's what we're all about here, is making the most of each and every moment of each and every day. Been sharing a lot of stuff. Today we're going to kind of cover a few things in different topics, if you will. I found an interesting article. I don't know how much I'm going to go with this, but I wanted to bring this up. Evidently there's some individuals out in the world, and I'm not going to necessarily address any specifics, but they're having an issue with what they term as the prosperity gospel. The prosperity gospel, as they understand it, got its start at the beginning of the 20th century, the end of the 19th century. And basically, I think what they're referring to is when New Thought really began to take off. It has grown and morphed, and there are many different spiritual philosophies that have taken some of the basic teachings and understandings of New Thought and incorporated them into the various faiths. And from my point of view, I think that's a good thing. But there's some people that believe that pulls people away from their true spirituality. And, you know, I can't see how a divine principle that we call God, a divine presence, would create us and everything else, and do so with the intent and intention that we not experience life at the highest, most abundant, prosperous level. Now, the prosperity gospel, as a lot of people teach it, is the idea, kind of like think and grow rich. Doesn't necessarily, in today's times, it's not necessarily associated with spirituality, but that's where its founding was, and its founding is in the idea that there is a God, there is a divine principle, and this God is infinite, this God is everywhere present, and this God is all power. And this God is consciousness and always creative. And in that creation of which we are all a part, our journey, if you will, our purpose for being here, is to express that gift of life that we have in the most abundant and prosperous way. And to do so, we understand that the gift of all the tools that we need in order to do this were also created at the same time that we were. Now, we're each individual, so how we define prosperity individually may be radically different. But as long as we define prosperity in such a way that it brings goodness and happiness into our heart, takes nothing from somebody else, and makes the world a better place, how do we find that being in contradiction, if you will, to a divine principle that we often in many other spiritual teachings call love? And I don't see it, but it was on my mind. I wanted to bring it up in kind of a way of opening up today's topic, which I'm going to go back to, again, the extension study course in Science of Mind, and this was a supplement that's to be found at the end of the 30th lesson, but we can also find it in Living the Science of Mind, and we find it on page 33, and the title is, What is Spirituality? What is spirituality? Holmes says we hear a great deal about certain people being spiritual, and there's nothing wrong with this, provided it does not become a model and attitude. Spirituality is rather an elusive thing. He says, I cannot think of a better illustration than to compare it with the idea of beauty, which a great artist must entertain if he or she is to create something worthwhile as an object of art. And I think that's a pretty good way of looking at it, because the ability to not only entertain, but to have a consciousness of beauty as someone that's creating something, it's a whole lot different than having an intellectual understanding. Just having the knowledge doesn't necessarily make us someone that can express beauty. Beauty can be expressed through art. It can be expressed through writing, music. It can be expressed through a look. It can be expressed in a meditation. But if we don't understand beauty on an inner level, within ourselves, we have an issue. We can talk about it, but we're talking about it as if we're talking about somebody or something else other than us. So today, as we go through the day, I want you to think about, do you, in your day-to-day, moment-to-moment life experience, entertain a concept, an embodiment, if you will, or an expression of this thing that we call spirituality? Now, I'm not talking about someone that walks around that feels like they have to put on a spiritual show, if you will. You can be in the depths of a study. You can be in the depths of a discussion. You can be in the depths of ordering food from a restaurant and still be in the moment experiencing a spiritualness within yourself. You know, oftentimes we get caught up in the idea that, you know, if I'm spiritual, it's that time that I pray, or it's that time that I meditate, or it's that Sunday time or Saturday time or Friday evening time when I'm expressing my spiritualness in a gathering of some sort. And all of that may be true, but we live 24/7. And we are spiritual beings that live in a spiritual universe created by a spiritual being, with a part of which is expressing in what we call physical reality. But as we understand physical reality, and this is an interesting concept, as we understand physical reality, again, it becomes very individual. For many years, I never thought of things this way, but the truth is that we experience what it is that we experience based on our belief about that particular experience. In other words, two of us or three of us could be experiencing the same event, the same situation, and come away with two or three totally different experiences. One of us may think it was kind of bland, maybe stupid. One may think it was terrible. Another one may think it was an incredible experience. Well, how does that happen? Partially, it happens because we bring our own individual judgments to whatever the event is, but part of it is what we bring within ourselves. If we have a consciousness, a concept of, and we'll use beauty or spirituality, within us as an embodiment, then we may notice the depth of beauty, the depth of spirituality. If we're spiritually clueless, and I'm not making a judgment, it's just some people are, we may not find it interesting at all. It may even seem silly. If we have an anti-spiritual belief, and there are many people in the world that take they take a position against things spiritual, but it's amazing how they often do it in a very spiritual sort of way, if you will. So, it's what we bring to the table within ourselves and the individual being, what we understand, what we believe, and determines what our experience is. And our experience, as we're talking about it today, is really our reality, our experience of reality. So, as we move through life, and I'm going to make the assumption that you're here today watching the show because you've chosen to partake in a spiritual path in your own life, or maybe seek a little information about it. And that's a good thing, regardless of where you go with it. But as we move forward through our day, how do we do that? I mean, how do we grow that? Or if we're someone that's already in the process, how do we support ourselves, if you will, in that journey, in that process? And one of the things that kind of triggered my idea for today is this little stack of cards. And actually, this is one of several that I have. And I have a little clip and keep them together like this, and I'll stick them in my pocket, and they go with me on a day. And what they are is they're reminders to me about certain things. And so today I'm going to go through some of these things and share them with you. This one says, the first person you need to make a favorable impression on is you. People do not lack strength, they lack will. Those are two different concepts, but the thing is, if you don't make a favorable impression upon yourself, how is it that you're going to relate to the world and teach the world to have a favorable impression towards you? Because in truth, we teach the world how to react, respond, and think about us. And at the same time, this concept of people do not lack strength, they lack will. Well, what is the will? The will is that which is within us, which helps to focus what we do. One of the great things I learned early on when I was in business was that you have two things that you need to understand. And the first one is the understanding of willpower and the understanding of imagination. And this was long before I became really interested in New Thought or any other particular spiritual journey at that time. But the idea of willpower and imagination. And there's been some really good studies done on this. And you can find them on the internet. You can Google willpower and imagination. And there are speakers that have over the years. Neville is a great one. If you want to really get a handle on the imagination and its power in our life. But the basic premise is willpower versus imagination. If you want to lose weight or change a habit, and you try to do so using willpower, chances are you're going to fail. Because your habits will eventually pull you away. Because remember, habits are based on beliefs that we hold, whether we're consciously aware of those beliefs or whether we're unconsciously aware of those beliefs. And we have a lot of beliefs that we hold that we're not consciously aware of. But when we decide that we're going to, say, lose weight, for example, and we use willpower, and I'm just going to follow this diet, I'm not going to do this, it's going to happen. That piece of cake or that ice cream or that particular favorite candy bar, whatever it is going to pass by in front of you at some point. You're going to become aware of it. And as you do, there's a part of your mind that's going to go, oh, I can remember how that tastes. Oh, I love that. It was so good. Or, whatever your individual way of expressing these things, right? And at first, our willpower is strong. We can be resolute in this. But over a period of time, as we reflect back on that, particularly if it's something that we really like as a treat, that willpower is going to break down. We are going to end up enjoying whatever that was. And at that point, we have essentially begun down the road to failure. How do we overcome that? It's very simple. We use the same thing that defeated our willpower. Remember I talked about there's that part of you that looks at this, whatever it is, and thinks about how good it tastes and how much we enjoy it. Well, that thing is our imagination. Imagination is a very powerful, powerful thing. And we each have it, even though some of us have been told to, as we grow up, not to utilize it, and so maybe it's not as well developed. But depending on the individual, some of us have greater, some of us don't have as great imaginations, but we all have the potential to grow our imagination, to make it stronger. And what we do, and I'll go back to this concept of weight loss, instead of trying to will our weight down, we begin to imagine what it would be like if we were at the weight that we wanted to be. How would I feel? How would I look? How would I act? How would the world see me? All these different things, as I'm describing them, are obviously images that we have within our imagination. How would I feel if I'm extremely overweight and I lost a bunch of weight? Boy, I'd feel good. I'd have lots of energy. You know, I could do things that I'm unable to do now, maybe hike or bicycle or swim or whatever it is that interests us. As we begin to think about that in our imagination, we can grow this concept. And what we do is we take within our imagination and we make this become very attractive to us. It becomes a goal. And we can imagine what it's like to live in that goal, to be in that goal, to experience that goal. And as we do that, you know, that thing comes in front of us, becomes, you know, it comes into our level of awareness, and we go, you know what? I really like that, but it's going to feel so good to be able to do and be and experience whatever it is that weight loss is going to bring into my life that, you know, I just don't need that right now. And so what we use is our imagination to create something greater in our imagination than the desire to have whatever that is. And I'm going to leave this at this point right now, and we're going to take our first break. We're going to come back, talk about imagination, willpower, and we'll move into other things. So I'll see you when we come back.
Linda Lee Kane is an author of fantasies, thrillers, contemporary fiction, and children's books. Order a book by Linda Lee Kane on Amazon or on lindaleekane.com. Call Paul Bonander of Bonander Real Estate to buy this beautiful 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom home at 3486 Mecca Avenue in Clovis. Call 559-246-6731 for all your real estate needs. The Saga of Bridget and Amanda by Carol Love Forbes brings to life the struggles of historical women in early America. Find The Saga of Bridget and Amanda on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and order your copy today.
CentralValleyTalk.com.
Welcome back to New Thought Talk. I am your host, the Reverend Steve Walling from the Spiritual Awareness Center located in Fresno, California. Welcome back to the show. When we went to the break, I was talking about utilizing the imagination to create something in our life. And the example I used was weight loss, but it can be anything. You know, if you happen to be a student that's struggling with learning, or if you happen to be someone starting out in business, in anything in life that you have a desire that you want to either experience or participate in, the imagination becomes a very powerful tool. And we use many things to enforce and reinforce our imagination. We have vision boards, we do goals, we write affirmations. There's many different things. But the most important thing is that we stay focused. And when we stay focused, it's at that point that we're using our willpower, because that is what willpower does. It helps us to keep focused on what it is we want. It doesn't make the experience in our minds of what we want, but it keeps our minds focused on that. So when that whatever passes in front of our eyes that may have broken our willpower, at that point our willpower can direct us back to that feeling of the desired end result that we've created in our imagination. Now, some people call this the law of attraction, and it is partly utilizing this law of attraction, but it's also utilizing many other both psychological and metaphysical concepts as we create in our life the experience that we want to experience. So our willpower helps focus our imagination. Our imagination is what creates within our mind the mold, if you will, the mental equivalent of that which we want to see expressed in our day-to-day life experience. So I'm going to go back here to my 3x5 cards. The first person you need to make a favorable impression on is you. Start out each and every day. Determine that you're going to make a favorable impression upon yourself. Get up in the morning, and your hair, and if you got long hair like me, it could be all over the place. And, we kind of make our way into our morning routine, and at some point we end up in front of a mirror. And, man, first things in the morning, that can be a rather striking experience. Or it can be at that point, because you've previously made a decision, that when you see yourself first thing in the morning, regardless of what that image is in the mirror, there is a greater image behind that. And that greater image is the divine principle, God, Goddess, however you want to call it, expressing as you in that moment. Greeting it, greeting yourself, greeting God in that moment. It's really kind of amazing when you get in the habit of doing that, how as part of establishing the greatness of your day, that can become critically important. You make that favorable impression before you become fully aware or move into consciousness. Leave your best self in each moment. Do you think about how you leave yourself in each and every moment? Or do you just go through your day? There are basically two kinds of people. There are people that believe that life is the gift that's given to them and is working for them, or that life happens to us and we have no choice, we're just a victim. Now, there's some variations in between, but that's basically it. It's true, life does come at us at the speed of life, and I've said that many times here on the show. But when you put yourself into a consciousness that no matter what life brings to us, no matter how positive or how tragic that may be, that the goodness and the godness is in each and every moment. And you can live your life to experience that regardless of how immense the tragedy might be. There's still goodness to be found. If you're not used to that kind of concept, it may be a little difficult to first get into. So don't try to fake it, if you will, if you're working on this, but attempt to move in that direction. Begin to create within yourself an understanding that there's good to be found in every second, every moment of life, even if it's just the realization that we're here to experience it. But oftentimes when we get into the habit of seeing the good in everything, we begin to notice more good. And an amazing thing happens as we begin to notice more good. It's like more good comes into our life. Once again, you can say, well, that's part of the law of attraction. Granted, it may be part of the law of attraction, but it's also part of the law of being a co-creator in your life experience, the law of cause and effect. Because, as I've said in times past in other shows, to get to these types of consciousness as part of our conscious, we have to kind of clean out the closet, if you will, of our mind, of the things that hold us in judgment or that limit us, that keep us back from all the potential that we have. As I said, we're all individuals, and our gifts are very individual to each and every one of us. But our ability, for example, to understand beauty, although may be different as I define it versus you and someone else, when we begin to realize that we can sense beauty, that beauty is a thing that cannot be given to somebody, but it can be shared as an experience or talked about or learned, the understanding. And it's an amazing thing, but we can learn to grow our understanding of beauty. Interesting thought. We grow our understanding of beauty. We can grow our understanding of love and peace and harmony. And as we do these things, and this is my point, as we take the time to do these and incorporate them here within ourselves, not that we don't want to have them up here intellectually, but we want to incorporate them here as an embodiment. We begin to see more beauty. We begin to experience more love. Our life becomes more peaceful, even in the midst of chaos. And there's teachers that have existed through the years in sometimes very horrible conditions that have realized that in the moment and then shared that teaching later on in times past. Viktor Frankl was one of those individuals, and if you ever have the opportunity to associate yourself with the teachings that he had, Man's Search for Meaning is one of the books that he wrote. It's a very powerful understanding. Part of our growth, part of our understanding of life, part of our spiritual journey. Here's another one. This is an affirmation that I use. Good things are supposed to happen to me. Good things are supposed to happen to me. That's just a reminder. We believe that all things are possible to God, and God intends us to be whole and happy. Your feelings are what you experience. Your feelings are not what you are. Your feelings are what you experience. They're not what you are, because your feelings are based on your beliefs. As you change your beliefs, and we do all the time, we change the way we feel about things. That changes our life experience, something we talked about earlier. As we change our beliefs and we change our feelings, we change our life experience. So the next reminder is the way we feel about everything is our life, or in our life is our life. The way we feel about things in our life is our life. If you're not experiencing a life of peace and harmony, joy, of accomplishment, achievement, maybe you want to change how you feel about the things in your life. If you feel like life is tough, if you feel like you don't have any opportunity, if you feel like, and we can build that list up to many different things, that's our life. Oftentimes we call that being a victim. Nobody's born a victim. We may be born into hard conditions. We may be born with many things that challenge us as we begin our life's journey. But the one thing we're not born into as is victims. That doesn't mean we don't experience things that happen to us. And yes, we can call being a victim of various things, but we don't have to own it. It doesn't have to own us. It doesn't have to be part of our life. We have tools within ourselves. We have a connectedness with Source, with Spirit. It may be a tougher journey for some than others, but it's a journey that we can all make. And when we begin to realize that we can make that journey, all of a sudden, the tunnel that seemed so incredibly dark because of our story, our past, our history, begins to show a light maybe at the end, or the hope of a light. We know that the darkness of itself is not a thing. All the darkness in the world cannot extinguish a single candle. But we have to be willing to seek the candle in the darkness where we're at. And sometimes, because we tell ourselves that we can't, it's not there, we bury ourselves in the darkness of nothingness and experience a life of hopelessness. When in reality, that which gave us life, that which sustains life, that which is the giver of life, is the giver of the gifts and the giver of light. But that light, amazingly, that light begins, expresses itself, not out there, but in here. And so our journey begins. We seek to make a connection spiritually. What is spirituality? I want to cover that a little bit today. It looks like it's time for our next break, so when we come back, we're going to kind of pick this up. We're going to talk about spirituality and go through some of these cards, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, and I'll see you when we come back.
Prepare to be amazed by the magic of Elder. Kyle Elder is a fantastic entertainer who has been studying magic for over 20 years. Book Kyle and the Magic of Elder for your event, large or small. Kyle will make you laugh and mesmerize you with his magic. For more information or a free quote, visit magicofelder.com or call 559-917-4543. Kristen McIntosh is a real estate broker who prides herself on providing the highest level of service to her customers. Her enthusiasm for achieving desired results is an asset to her clients. Contact Kristen at 559-419-0333 and visit KristenMcIntosh.com. Connect with Dr. Alan Hedberg. Watch Doctor Teach Me to Parent on CentralValleyTalk.com Saturdays at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Listen to The Psychology Report anytime at thepsychologyreport.buzzsprout.com. Visit booksbyhedberg.com and order a book for your personal growth. And join the conversation on twitter.com/Alan G. Hedberg.
I'm Greg Steen, your host for the Truth for Seniors show. Glad you're joining us today and coming to you from Central Valley Talk in the heart of Fresno. So every Wednesday at 2 you can find us, and we'll be here giving you the most up-to-date and accurate information possible, bringing you experts, as we promised, from lots of different fields related to seniors, senior needs, the caregiver needs, and everything that goes with that. So if you're looking for the right information and timely information, this is the place to be.
CentralValleyTalk.com.
Welcome back to New Thought Talk. I am your host, the Reverend Steve Walling, from the Spiritual Awareness Center located in Fresno, California. Anyway, moving on. What is spirituality? How do we do that? What is it about? Well, we talked about that it's not dogma, and it's not a theology. It is an embodiment of a consciousness, if you will. And we're going to move forward with that a little bit. Holmes says, perfect technique alone does not result in great art. And again, we're talking about an artist. In other words, someone can be extremely proficient in technique, but when they create something, it has no soul to it. We might appreciate the technique, but we can't get a feeling of the beauty, because technique in and of itself is lifeless. As we begin to walk our spiritual path, particularly when we come into New Thought and we talk about various techniques, like the technique of spiritual mind healing or spiritual affirmative treatment. We talk about techniques of meditation and various other spiritual tools. Being proficient in the technique is only the beginning steps of a very long journey. Yes, we want to learn the techniques, we want to be proficient, but more importantly, we want to embody the consciousness behind it. So he goes on to say, we speak of the soul of an artist, that subtle and indefinable something which is the essence of all art. And the same with things spiritual. We seek to begin within ourselves, to connect with that which is really indefinable. What I express and experience within myself, I can tell you about, but you're not going to experience as I do. Your experience will be perfect for you, and it will be extremely individual to you. But once you begin the process, at some point you'll get a realization of what that is. And we've talked in the past, particularly for someone that in New Thought that is working with spiritual mind healing, affirmative prayer treatment, having that spiritual experience, as Holmes calls it, becomes extremely important. And it's important because if you've not experienced a spiritualness within yourself, you really don't know or know that you know when you get to that part of this technique or method of spiritual mind healing. And getting to that knowingness becomes very important. And we've talked about it in the past, and I don't know if I'll get to it today, no pun intended, but it will be covered again in future shows. Knowing and knowing that you know. He says this is a definite feeling, a communion with invisible harmony is the way he puts it, a supreme being, the mind and the heart of God, or the creative essence. It is the same with what we call spirituality, which is a word too often misused. From our viewpoint, spirituality is one's recognition of the universe as a living presence of good, truth, beauty, peace, power, and love. And to this should be added happiness, joy, enthusiasm, and universal harmony, which, like the great rhythm of life, flows through everything. In the beginning of the show, when I talked about finding the good in all of life's experience, that's part of our journey, our spiritual journey, our journey of understanding and uncovering within ourselves the spiritualness that exists here. As I said, we are spiritual beings. We existed before our body existed. We will exist after the body no longer serves its function. We're spiritual beings, created by the ultimate, infinite spiritual being. In the creation of this spiritual being, which is a spiritual creation, out of which all is created is that which is created. And if God is the creator, and I believe it is, it's what I teach, profess, then all that is created is out of God, the creator. God is spirit, creation is spirit. We're spiritual beings. So if we, in this life experience, if we seek to really understand our place in it, it becomes important that we make that spiritual connection. At least that's what I believe. So we go through life, and at some point we have a realization that, you know what, there's more to life than what my five senses tell me. I've noticed that there's some people experience life at such a higher level of experience. They express life in incredible ways, and things just seem to be always in harmony. How does that happen? Well, that may be what first caught your interest, or any of many number of things that brought you to a point where you decided to take and understand and embody and learn what it is that we are, what it is that creation is, and what is behind it. We begin our spiritual path. New Thought, as a teaching, really got started middle of the 19th century. Around the turn of the 20th century, it exploded. Moved into the world as we understand it, the so-called secular world. Grew to a great degree, is still very prominent in the world, but is prominent in many ways that are no longer a part of the spiritual philosophies, if you will, the religion of New Thought. We see it in so many different ways in the world that have been accepted by people. The power of positive thinking, having a good attitude, goal setting, affirmations, meditation, all these various things that are part of and incorporated in New Thought, in Science of Mind and Spirit, we see people doing and reaping rewards of that doing this without necessarily making the spiritual connection. And that leads us, or leads me anyway, back to what I opened with at the beginning of the show, the idea of a prosperity gospel. And for some reason that just really rubs some people the wrong way. I don't really understand why, other than maybe some people have a belief that this life should be struggling, or a struggle, and that we shouldn't be happy or prosperous until we leave this physical plane and move into our next spiritual experience. But that's not what was taught. You see, if we go back to the master teacher, he didn't say, wait. He said, the kingdom of heaven is to be found within us. That's pretty definite. What does that mean? It means that within each and every one of us is the ability, the capability, to experience heaven as we define it in this life. I don't know about you, but I haven't seen a whole lot of heaven in the world and all the stuff that goes on in the news. So what's the story? Well, I'll tell you what the story is, at least from my point of view. The story is simply this. The potential is here. We have people we've documented throughout history, including Jesus and various other avatars and masters and teachers and so on and so forth. And they've all taught pretty much the same thing, But we don't see a great deal of it reflected back in our life experience. So how does that play out? Well, being somewhat of a student of history, if you look at what happened in the 20th century, from the beginning to the end of the 20th century, there's a lot of stuff there. And there's a lot of violence and a lot of so-called evil and despair. But if you look at the position of humanity from the beginning of the 20th century to the end of the 20th century, you see that life has pretty much elevated itself to a great part of the world. And even in parts of the world where there's struggle, the struggle today in a lot of those places is not like the struggle it was back then. Now, that's not saying that there's not some serious struggles in the world in certain places. That's true. We have the ability within the race consciousness of humanity to keep ourselves pretty much a slave to ideas, concepts, and beliefs that will limit our ability to experience life maximally. But there's a good part of the world that's grown out of that their consciousness has grown. Yes, we are in a moment of upheaval in society, but that's no different than any other moment in society because they're all full with certain levels of upheaval. But what comes out of it over a period of time is greater growth, greater consciousness. We move as a species, if you will, humanity, we move to make a better world. Our concepts of what a better world is may differ from group to group, but in the heart of being, we're all moving to that at some level. Some works, some don't work. We find out, and we move, and we grow. Our role in this, as I talked about finding the good in everything, is to be able to look out into the world with the understanding that all people, all humanity, they're all doing the best they can with the tools they have. Now, we may not understand their tools, we may not agree with their tools, we definitely may not want to use their tools or be experienced to them. But if we start at that point, and we recognize that they're all a creation of the divine, which means that there's just a great oneness, then we open up channels for greater understanding. And as we open up channels for greater understanding, we open up channels for greater growth for all of humanity. This is something that I've shared many times. It was a belief that I understand that Holmes had, and he did believe that the philosophy that he taught, if embodied in the world, would create a better world if we got to that tipping point, as he called it, that there would be a change in worldwide consciousness. And I believe that's true. We have to begin to understand what our purpose is in this life. We are spiritual beings living a spiritual life in a physical plane, but our purpose is to grow spiritually, to grow maximally, to live a life of peace, harmony, love, prosperity, wholeness. That's what the divine creator created us to do, because as we do this, we express it ever greater with every breath that we take. Going back to my stack of cards here, I carry these with me throughout the day. Like I say, I have several of these stacks of cards, and various parts of the day I'll pull a stack out and I'll shuffle it maybe, and I'll do this, and I'll take one out here. And this one says, have an understanding faith, which is the acceptance of the desire as already being there, is the acceptance of the evidence of it coming into being. That's it, using the imagination. In creating a mental equivalent, we must have clarity. We must see it as real. We see it in our mind, we see it in our imagination. We must have interest. And interest, as I define it here, is feeling as if it is, and feeling it with intensity. Not only are we seeking to create abundance in our life, not only are we seeking to create goodness in our life, but as we do that, again, as we do that in such a way that it brings goodness and happiness into my life, goodness and happiness into the life of those around me, it brings more goodness and more happiness into the world. It's pretty awesome. We each have the ability to do that, and as we each actively participate in that, it's amazing. we create a new world just through one individual. They call that the butterfly effect, and that's an interesting story I've covered in shows past, but very, very simply, the idea that a single thing happening in one place can cause a great deal of change in someplace else in the world. And I'm going to leave you with that thought. We're going to take our next break, and when we come back, we're going to pick this up.
Linda Lee Kane is an author of fantasies, thrillers, contemporary fiction, and children's books. Order a book by Linda Lee Kane on Amazon or on lindaleekane.com. Call Paul Bonander of Bonander Real Estate to buy this beautiful 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom home at 3486 Mecca Avenue in Clovis. Call 559-246-6731 for all your real estate needs. The Saga of Bridget and Amanda by Carol Love Forbes brings to life the struggles of historical women in early America. Find The Saga of Bridget and Amanda on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and order your copy today.
CentralValleyTalk.com.
This 3-bedroom, 2-bath home in Clovis is now for sale. Nestled on a cul-de-sac in a planned unit development, the quiet neighborhood is near Sierra Vista Mall, grocery stores, and Clovis Unified Schools. This well-maintained home featuring an open kitchen with a breakfast bar, dining area, a family room with fireplace, ceiling fans, vaulted ceilings, and inside laundry room. The large master suite has 2 large closets, a roomy bathroom with shower, and exterior door leading to the patio. Located near the intersection of Gettysburg and Fowler Avenue, call Mike Briggs Properties at 559-486-6758 to buy this home today.
Protect yourself by letting private investigator Michael Morgan Clark get the facts you need in matters of infidelity and divorce, corporate investigations, criminal defense, workers' comp, child parental abduction, wrongfully accused. Michael Morgan Clark will investigate anyone. Call 559-785-1900 or visit clarkinvestigations.com.
CentralValleyTalk.com.
Welcome back to New Thought Talk. I am your host, the Reverend Steve Walling, from the Spiritual Awareness Center located in Fresno, California. And welcome back. I hope you've been enjoying the show. We've been talking about spirituality and other things in general, but I want to read something here, and this is from a letter that Holmes wrote at the beginning of one of the lessons in the home study course. And he says, "We are all on the pathway of self-discovery. The thing we seem not to have realized is that when we discover the true self, we shall also be finding God in the only place where God is to be found, and that is at the center of our own being." Now think about that. If the only place for us to find the divine is within the center of our own being, the obstacles to get from out here to in there are the obstacles that we've created in our own life. Our habits of judgment, hate, anger, of looking out into the world and finding less than this when we could and should seek good in all things. Holding on to the things that keep us limited and bound, we create more to be limited and bound by. He says, "And is it not wonderful that the discovery of God and the real self become one and the same thing and are an intimate, personal something to each one of us? While your God and my God is the same God, each approaches the divine presence in his or her own way. Each, in his or her own way, makes the discovery for his or herself." And that is so true. He says, "Spirituality cannot be taught, but it can be felt, it can be practiced, and it can be embodied. Each in his own consciousness must experience it in his or her own way, and his or her way will always be best for him or her. Indeed, it will be the only way that it can be done. Because in the secret precinct of the mind, which one is alone with, it is there that God exists, and nothing else can enter. In our journey to experience God is also our journey in expressing God in this life, this experience we call life. And as we express God, divine goddess principle, whatever you want to call it, as we seek to express it in all that we do, we also are creating greater good in all levels. It's very personal for sure, but don't get confused. Like I said, in that personalness, we have a greater effect in the world around us. I have a friend that is very involved in their spiritual journey, but they just can't seem to get over the judgment issue, anger, hatred. And I bring this up only because you probably have friends like this too. And what do? Well, a man or woman convinced against their will remains unconvinced still. The idea of having that argument or discussion, trying to create an understanding. We can be firm in our belief. We can understand the divine principle. We can share the love of God, and however it is that we do that. But at some point, if someone chooses to stay in their hatred or their anger, and they don't want to let it go, what is one to do? We each have to make our own decision in that case. My case, I had to separate myself from that. And it was tough. My prayer is always for the better for that individual, and that is my prayer. I have no judgment. I hold nothing against them, but I have created a boundary for myself. I love them and know them as an expression of God, and we can each do that in our own life. We have people oftentimes that, whether they be from another faith, that want to tell us how we're wrong. Like I opened the show with, there's a lot of people out there currently in the spiritual world that have real issue with the idea of a prosperity gospel. And although it's taught in ways that I wouldn't necessarily teach it, anything that brings good into life and the life experience of others has got to be God expressing at that level through them. Calling people names. You know, the way the story goes, Jesus said, "Judge not, lest ye be judged, and by whatever measure you judge, by that measure, or by whatever measure you judge, by that measure you shall be judged." If we think about that, that can be pretty harsh when we think about it applied to ourselves. We have oftentimes the great imaginative ability to excuse ourselves from our own faults. But when you get up in the morning and you end up in front of that mirror and you greet the day and you claim you're good and you welcome the godness in your life, you look into the eyes of that in the mirror that looks back at you, whether you want to consciously recognize it or not. That understanding's there. That story is there, that belief is there, that limitation is there. And until we actively choose to change it, more than likely it'll probably stay there. Our journey we call spirituality, spiritual growth, is the desire, the process, and the application to see and create greater good in our life. I tell my students that as we treat for ourselves, or we're treating for somebody else, that in our treatment that we always include those that are beyond that which we're treating for. That we don't ask, well, we don't really ask anyway, but we don't make that declaration for our personal good or good for someone else and not include more beyond that. And the more that you can embody, the more you can open your mind up to, the greater good you bring into the world. I and my Father are one, he said. And he wasn't being exclusive. If we truly are a one, if we truly are a unity, if we are a oneness, then for those of us that have held angst or whatever, it's time we need to reevaluate. We love our neighbors, we love ourselves. Ooh, that can be tough, can't it? No, it's actually very easy. That doesn't mean that we have to expose ourselves to limitations or harassment or abuse by others. As I addressed earlier, sometimes we have to make decisions. We have to move our life in a different direction. Maybe we might say we leave people behind, but we really don't. We've just put up a boundary. But the door is always there. It's open. You can come through. You are loved. You are the divine principle. As we look to see good in all things, getting to that understanding, it begins to be easier to incorporate into our life. It's also easier to incorporate having definite boundaries too, because we get that understanding. Out of the book entitled The Hidden Power of the Bible, I want to read something to you as we close today, and it's entitled The Divine Bounty. Holmes writes, God cares for the birds who do not gather into barns. So shall we be cared for if we trust and do not doubt. But we are to seek the kingdom first. Jesus bids us to completely trust in God for everything and in every instant. He had a complete reliance upon God. Dare we say that such a confidence would be misplaced? Have we ever tried it? And until we've tried it and failed, we are not in a position to contradict this theory. Those who are proving the principle to be definite and upon that which an absolute reliance may be placed. Not a maybe reliance, but an absolute reliance. Having something in your life that you can absolutely rely on, divine principle, that which we call God. Have no fear of tomorrow. Enjoy today. Refuse to carry the corpse of a mistaken yesterday. What untold misery is suffered through the burdens imposed by our yesterdays and the bitter prospects of our tomorrows. The good of the present day is too often sandwiched between these two impossible situations. The day in which we live is sufficient. We are to live today as though God were in his heaven while all is well in our souls. Heaven is to be found within. God is to be found within. We covered those points today. We kind of got a little scattered, and tend to do that from time to time. Make yourself some cards or a list. Carry them with you. Just as reminders. You stick your hand in your pocket or your purse or whatever. Pull one out and take a look at it. Read it. Practicing the presence of God is a habit that we get into when we use our imagination and our willpower to create that habit in our life. And as we create that habit, we change our life perspective, how we see life and experience life. And that's going to wrap it pretty much for today. You can email me at rev.steve11@live.com. I answer emails. I treat for those that request treatment, respond to them. If you're in Fresno, you can show up at the Sunday service at 1470 North Van Ness Spiritual Awareness Center. Otherwise, I'll see you when we come back next week, and know that as you go through the week that the light of God surrounds you, the love of God enfolds you, the power of God protects you, and the presence of God watches over you. Truly, wherever you are, God is there. All is well. Make it a great week because you have that power, and I'll see you when we come back.
CentralValleyTalk.com